Imagine this. You're trying to save someone from starvation, but the very food you give them could actually put their life in danger. It sounds totally backward, right? Well, it's a real and incredibly dangerous medical paradox, and that's what we're going to break down today.
I mean, it goes against everything we think we know. Food is life. So how on earth could it be a threat? It turns out that when the body's been deprived of food for a long time, just reintroducing it can set off a really dangerous chain reaction. And that's the paradox we need to unpack.
Okay, so there's a medical term for this whole thing. It's called refeeding syndrome. And it's basically this cascade of severe electrolyte and fluid shifts that can just wreak havoc on a malnourished body when it's suddenly forced to process food again.
So to really get why this happens, we've got to peek under the hood and see what's going on inside the body during starvation. It's actually in this incredible state of survival and adaptation.
Think of it this way. A healthy body is like a factory plugged into the main power grid, right? It runs on carbohydrates. But a starving body? It flips a switch. It powers everything down and turns on its emergency generators and starts burning its own fat and muscle just to keep the lights on.
Now here's where it all gets so dangerous. While the body is in starvation mode, crucial minerals inside our cells, think phosphate, they get all used up. Now when food, especially carbs, is suddenly brought back into the picture, the pancreas releases this huge surge of insulin to handle all that sugar. This insulin basically unlocks the cells to let nutrients in, and because the cells are so desperate for those minerals they lost, they just pull them from the bloodstream all at once, and that sudden grab for minerals is what causes the levels in the blood to crash. And the result of that crash? It's a multi-system failure. That sudden drop in electrolytes can have catastrophic consequences for the heart, the brain, and the muscles. The very systems the body fought so hard to protect are now suddenly in jeopardy. So as you can imagine, the fear of triggering this syndrome led to this whole era of extreme caution in medicine. For decades, a very specific rule took hold, and it was all about avoiding this risk at all costs. For years and years, the accepted wisdom was simple. Start low and go slow. You'd begin with a tiny number of calories and then just painstakingly increase them over days, sometimes even weeks. The thinking was pretty straightforward. If you introduce calories gradually, you can avoid that massive insulin surge and prevent the electrolytes from crashing. But, and this is a big but, this approach had some major downsides. Patients would often gain weight painfully slowly, and it led to these incredibly long, expensive, and just emotionally draining hospital stays. But over the last decade or so, researchers started to really question this old way of thinking. They began looking into a much more aggressive approach, and they were armed with some pretty compelling new data. And this set up a clear showdown between two different philosophies. You've got the traditional start low, go slow method on one side, and on the other, you have this new high-calorie approach where patients start on way more calories and are ramped up really quickly.
Which of course brings us to the big question. Is going faster actually better? Was the old wisdom maybe wrong?
Well, to answer that, we have to look at the evidence. And thankfully, a major review in 2023 did exactly that, pulling together all the available data to give us a much clearer picture.
Researchers looked at 20 different studies that included, all told, almost 2,200 participants. And these were all children and adolescents being treated for severe malnutrition. So this wasn't some small observation. It was a really comprehensive look at the science.
And what they found was stunning. Across all of those studies, with all of those patients, many of whom are on these aggressive high-calorie plans, they found evidence of only a single true case of refeeding syndrome. Just one.
So the huge takeaway here is this. The data is strongly suggesting that the total calorie count isn't the boogeyman everyone thought it was. It seems the fear of the calories themselves might have been misplaced.
What the research really shows is that the single biggest predictor of complications is just how malnourished the person is to begin with, their starting body weight. In fact, get this, one study in the review actually found more cases of refeeding syndrome in the low-calorie group. With close medical monitoring, the risk of going with a high-calorie approach seems to be surprisingly low. So if the old fears were exaggerated, what does that actually mean in the real world? Because this isn't just some academic debate. This shift in thinking has profound implications for how quickly and how well patients can recover. Let's look at the results. The data is crystal clear. Patients on a higher calorie plan gain weight significantly faster and more consistently. And that's one of the most critical goals for a successful recovery.
And we can actually put a number on that. One of the key studies found that the rate of weight gain was nearly double in the high-calorie group compared to the traditional, slow method. That is a massive difference in how effective the treatment is.
But this number right here, this might be the real game changer. One study found that using a high-calorie approach cut down the average hospital stay by a staggering 17 days. That's over 2 weeks less time in the hospital, which means lower costs, less stress on families, and getting a patient back to their life that much sooner.
You know, the authors of that landmark 2023 review, they summed it up perfectly. They concluded that the long-held fears about high-calorie refeeding have, quote, been exaggerated over time. The evidence just doesn't back up the level of caution that has defined treatment for so long.
Which leaves us with one final and pretty provocative question. The data suggests that a faster, more effective path to recovery isn't just possible, but with the right monitoring, it's safe. So the only real question left is, how long until faster becomes the new standard of care?